Hello guys, welcome to this video. For today's video, we're going to be talking about CI/CD. So what is CI/CD? How do you implement CI/CD? What are the options for implementing CI/CD? And whether CI/CD is right for your team today. So stay tuned and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you learned something so you're kept in the loop whenever I drop a new video. So what is CI/CD? In this video, we're going to be looking at some fundamental concepts of the CI/CD process. We're going to look at the various options for implementing CI/CD today in your organization or in your workflow. We're also going to compare both options side by side and see which is best for your team based on a couple of features. And finally, we're going to conclude by looking at whether you should implement CI/CD in your team today and why you should. Is CI/CD really the right or the best approach for your team size? And a couple other options. To be able to fully understand what CI/CD is, it's important for us to understand what the various processes are for deploying software from the point of development all the way to which software is being released. Take for example, the current way of releasing software is that you build software in some local machine, push it to some remote repository, run your test, push this to a staging environment of some sort, and then finally, if all of this is validated, then this is pushed to production. So CI/CD is still keeping track of all of these flows, but then the automation of all of this. So in general, the CI/CD process encompasses everything that happens from the point at which software is developed on a local machine all the way to the point at which software is deployed or a deployable artifact is produced. So in general, this is the automation of your software release process from the point of build all the way to the point at which it is deployed to some environment of sorts, either a staging or production environment, or to the point at which you have a deployable artifact that you can deploy, and this is what's known as continuous delivery. So the term CI/CD is sometimes used to mean continuous integration and continuous deployment, but that D can sometimes be continuous delivery. What really matters is that at the end of the CI/CD process, you have a final deployable artifact that can be released on an environment of choice. So how do you implement CI/CD today? There are two main ways in which CI/CD has been implemented. The first is the traditional way of implementing CI/CD, and the second is using a managed CI/CD platform. In a traditional CI/CD environment, your team is fully responsible for managing your CI/CD application and the server or infrastructure. So in this case, you need to have some administrators who set up the CI/CD server, install the CI/CD application, and also set up triggers that connect to your code repository and monitor for changes. So when a developer pushes code to your code repository, this notifies your CI/CD server, which pulls the code from the code repository, builds the necessary artifacts, and deploy that into a pre-production or production environment. You can also run necessary automated tests before building and pushing these artifacts to your production or pre-production environment. But always remember, in a traditional CI/CD environment, your team is fully responsible for the setup and management of the CI/CD solution. A very popular CI/CD application that's used in traditional environments is Jenkins. So as mentioned earlier, in a traditional CI/CD environment, your team is fully responsible for managing the infrastructure, so the entire cost, time, and effort involved in managing the CI/CD infrastructure and tooling rests wholly on your team. Next, let's look at managed CI/CD. Managed CI/CD completely encapsulates or abstracts out the entire management component of running CI/CD. So this means your CI/CD tooling and setup is managed by a remote cloud provider, completely taking all of the responsibility off your development team. And what this means is your team no longer have to worry about running system updates and security updates, because all of this is now provided as a package by the cloud provider. So for example, when a developer pushes code to your code repository, this triggers a pipeline that runs your managed CI/CD platform, building, running your tests, and as an outcome of that, deploying new changes to your staging or pre-production service. Some examples are Circle CI, Travis CI, and Cloud Build, which I tend to call a fully serverless CI/CD platform. In an upcoming video, I'm going to be doing a full demo of the Cloud Build CI/CD platform and how you can set up CI/CD using Cloud Build. So some core features of managed CI/CD workflow are zero infrastructure management, as we have mentioned. Your cloud provider fully manages your infrastructure, so your team no longer has to worry about managing the servers manually. Next is most managed CI/CD platforms run on a pay-per-use basis. So this way you only pay for the resources you run or the resources that are used when your CI/CD workflows are running. And these can be a huge difference in cost compared to a traditional CI/CD platform. Next is scaling. Most managed CI/CD platforms support concurrency and easy scaling. So for example, if your build runs in a single VM and takes a lot of time, you can easily provision more resources or scale that out into multiple nodes or VMs. And finally, most managed CI/CD platforms are microservice friendly. Most of them support Docker. For example, if you're running a containerized setup, you can easily use images from Docker Hub or your custom built images in your CI/CD workflows. So which one should you go for? There are 4 main points that I think determines or should determine the option you decide to go with when implementing CI/CD. The first is your team size. As we have seen, running a traditional CI/CD setup involves a heavy load on your team to manage the infrastructure itself. So for example, if you have a small team, you don't want your team spending most of its productive hours managing and maintaining a CI/CD server. Such productive hours can be channeled into actual software development. However, if you have a large team size and can afford to maintain and manage this infrastructure yourself, then you may think the traditional is fine, but then there are other points to consider also. Next is expense. Think of expense as the entire cost of managing your CI/CD. So in a traditional CI/CD environment, this involves the cost, effort, and time involved in maintaining and managing the CI/CD servers. And remember that the cost scales as your system scales. Next is integrations. If your CI/CD workflow needs to connect to third-party applications and services, most likely managed CI/CD providers already have this tooling built into the product, and you just need to use it without saving you time and effort. In a traditional CI/CD environment, you have to build this tooling yourself for every single integration that you want to support. And finally, security. In a traditional CI/CD environment, your team is responsible for managing security, keeping the system up to date, managing security of the host operating system, and also the software that you run on it. And this can become overwhelming if you have a small team, because you have to constantly keep track of security changes, CVEs, and continually update your server to always be up to standard. And besides that, in a traditional CI/CD environment, you have to set up security and access role control because you want to control who has access to the CI/CD server. Because as we've mentioned earlier, usually most setups have access to your pre-production or production environment. So you want to ensure that you have really tight security for this system. So should you use CI/CD or not? A recent study showed that only about 40% of DigitalOcean users use CI/CD. Now this makes sense if you think about it, because most of these users could be individual users setting up and managing applications using DigitalOcean. As we have established, CI/CD automation can be really useful in improving productivity in your team because it helps you manage your software release processes much more efficiently. But then if you're a super small or single man team, then it may not be worth the effort at the start. So just make sure to consider all the previous factors we've talked about if deciding to go with one CI/CD solution or the other. Thank you for watching. I hope you've learned something from this video. In the next video, we're going to be exploring Google Cloud Build and all the amazing features that it provides. The next video is going to be a live demo where we're going to build a complete CI/CD process or workflow from start to finish. So see you then. Okay, thanks for sticking to the end, and if you learned something, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. In the next video, we're going to be exploring Google Cloud Build, which is a serverless managed CI/CD solution. We're going to be setting up the entire CI/CD flow from start to finish. So make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you're kept in the loop when that video drops, which should be about a week from now. And until then, don't forget to stay hydrated. See you next time. Cheers.